The United States bought Alaska from Russia's Tsar in 1867. The Department of Interior, headquartered more than 4,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., assumed charge of the Aleuts, as it had other Native Americans.
In many regards, it was the same paternalistic setup that other Indian groups in the United States experienced. But it was unique in that the government wanted land from American Indians, but in the case of the Pribilofs, they wanted and needed the Aleuts' labor.
Under the terms of the treaty, Aleuts were United States citizens, but for decades to come, virtually every aspect of Aleut life was subjected to federal scrutiny and control.
We bought Alaska right after the end of the Civil War and after we emancipated the slaves, while we continued a system of enslavement in these remote islands.
Greed and racism in 19th century America are handmaidens to one another. They march in lockstep. They are married. Slavery was profitable. If slavery hadn't been profitable, slavery would have disappeared in the 1830s. It might even have disappeared in the 1780s. The legacy of that lasts into Reconstruction after the Civil War. Blacks are cheap labor. Indians aren't even mattering. Anybody who came into the Aleutian Islands, to the Pribilof Islands, hoped for maximum profitability. One piece of that formula was to employ the local people on the cheapest possible terms.
Federal officials, under pressure to justify the purchase of Alaska, wanted to maximize income. Commercial sealing was an obvious source of revenue, and Aleuts the obvious source of labor. Many in government believed that to profit from one, you had to control the other.
To subdue a people, to render them submissive, you degrade them. That's part of any colonial system. And one of the ways they degraded the Aleuts was by segregating them and humiliating them. The agents, for example, issued orders what time they were to go to bed. They controlled the choice of marriage partners. There was a recreation hall, but only the whites were allowed to use it. They were treated like dogs. And though there were some protests, nobody heard them in those years.
Well into the 20th century, Aleuts would remain unheard and unseen. Then World War II found Alaska, and the Aleuts' lives, already a study in oppression, took an ugly turn.
I was born and raised on St. Paul Island. We had a boat that comes 4 times a year that brings the mail. There was no radios hardly and no TV, nothing like that. And I started school when I was 7 years old. And the one thing that I really learned in English was I pledged allegiance to the flag of America. One day I told my dad what I learned in school, and he was so proud of me. He said, "We're part of the United States, you know. I'm glad you learned that." And so from then on, I used to be proud to be an American, you know, not just an Aleut. We celebrate 4th of July. They dress us up in nice Sunday dresses, and my mom and dad ordered a flag. So we hold a little flag and just go around town and have picnics and lemonade. We didn't know the outside life too much. The Fish and Wildlife was the one that ran the island. There was an agent And he has an assistant, and there was a storekeeper. There was a doctor. I think there were about 7 or 8 employees. Oh, they had all the power they could. We couldn't go over them. If you do, you're punished for that. As we were growing up, I got married to a local boy there, and we had a wonderful life together. And he was a baseball player, so I used to look forward to that Sunday afternoon baseball game. It happened one Sunday afternoon. I was home staying with my children, and my husband was playing ball. And then he came running in and said, they stopped the ball game. They come to evacuate us people.
The evacuation of nearby St. George Island began that same Sunday in June 1942.
And we just got home from church. We had a priest there. His name was Father Fiodosi. And my father was a reader in the church, so we all went to church and came home and had some hot biscuits and coffee and so on. And somebody came to our door and said, we have to get ready because we will be taken off the island very soon.
Having received orders from the Navy to prepare for immediate evacuation, the entire village has been mined with TNT, the cattle rounded up and stanchioned and then shot, pails of gasoline stationed in each house to facilitate destruction.
We were allowed to take 1 bag apiece and clothing on our backs, and that was the way we were to get on the ship.
A total of 19 Fish and Wildlife Service employees and 478 aleuts were herded aboard the U.S. Army transport Delaroth.
We don't know where we were going, but we left the island.
Nobody, not even the federal officials in charge, knew where they were going. Ordered to follow a devious course, the Delaroth began to zigzag its way south.